We brought the man from the States. It hasn't been easy bringing them in here. As you can appreciate, you just can't walk through the front door.
War is coming to this country where the color of your skin will be your uniform, and the level and state of your consciousness will determine the level or the degree of your commitment and your survival.
And as the student leader on campus, we invited the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan as the keynote speaker for what was called African Festival during so-called Black History Month. I say so-called Black History Month because whites in America have given us 1 month out of the year to celebrate and observe Black history, which is an infinite history. We are the original man and the original woman of the universe, of the planet Earth. And we have an infinite history that cannot be crammed into the shortest month of the year and the coldest month of the year. But we invited the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan onto our campus. And I was studying for the Christian ministry at that time. And he transformed my life, impacted on my life. I was beginning to break with that commitment toward the ministry because I believed, of course, that the white Christian slave traders were very instrumental, of course, in breaking the backs of black people, in a sense, and completely robbing us of a knowledge of self in what we know to be the African or the Black Holocaust. And so I was beginning to move away from that. When the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan came to speak on our campus, I had never heard a man speak the way I heard this man speak, and I had never heard a man touch to the very heart and core of things. He showed us how to find ourselves in the Bible and in the Holy Quran. He showed us the liberation struggle of black people in the Bible and in the Quran. And he showed us that there were prophecies that had prophesied that we would be in this condition for 400 years in a strange land among a strange people, and that God would come and raise up one in our midst, and that one, as a great divine liberator and emancipator, would begin to prepare us for our divine rendezvous with destiny as again a free, proud, and productive people, the descendants of the people who gave civilization to the earth, and law and medicine and science and government and morality and religion. But those were my early beginnings in Islam. And my slave name was Harold. Good British name.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And I later became known as Harold X. And as Harold X, I rose up through the ranks of the Nation of Islam. I had worked with the Black Panther Party and the NCCF, the National Committee to Combat Fascism. I had worked with the Cultural Nationalist Movement and had done some work with the Dr. Martin Luther King Civil Rights movement that was sweeping the country, as we all did in our local areas to some degree.
Wow, sorry, was this in Louisiana?
I was born in Houston, Texas. So I worked in Texas, I worked in Louisiana, I worked in Mississippi, and I also worked in Georgia and Alabama, just moving as a student would do it, and one who's just coming into or beginning to come into a knowledge of self, and dissatisfied and angry over the wretched and terrible and poor condition of our people. During this period, as Harold X rose up through the ranks of the Nation of Islam, I sold at one point 1,000 Muhammad Speaks newspapers a week. And that's what took me throughout the South. We'd leave on weekends and just go from state to state. I was a top Muhammad Speaks newspaper salesman. I rose up through the ranks to be section leader, squad leader, lieutenant, first officer, rose up ultimately to become captain, student minister, assistant minister, and all the way on up ultimately to be the third in that great line of history. The first great national spokesman of the black movement was Minister Malcolm X, and the second was chosen by the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad was Minister Louis Farrakhan, and Minister Louis Farrakhan chose me as his national spokesman, the third in that line behind Malcolm and behind himself. As national spokesman of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan at that time, and prior to that, the supreme captain of the elite and well-trained and disciplined FOI, or Fruit of Islam, and later to become the national assistant, the immediate assistant to the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, similar to Vice President, and was quite honored that he had this kind of love and confidence in me. So I have held every position in the Nation of Islam for the most part. I've been a secretary, I've been regional minister, and have ministered out of all of the major regional points. Los Angeles, on the West Coast. I was again in that great line of history where Malcolm X, Minister Malcolm X, Al-Hajj Malik Al-Shabazz, Brother Omawale, was minister of the world-famous Mosque Number 7 in Harlem, and the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan became minister of Mosque Number 7 in Harlem, and ultimately chose me, again after himself and after Malcolm, to be minister of Mosque Number 7 in Harlem, New York. So that's basically background and a history of early beginnings and to some degree up to today with the Nation of Islam.
Okay. Can we, obviously things have moved on quite significantly since that. So can I ask you, Dr. Muhammad, I know you mentioned it yesterday, but just for the record, yesterday the members of the nation were conspicuous by their absence at yesterday's meeting. I wonder why you thought that was.
I don't know why they were absent. This question could best be answered, as I said last night, by asking them. I would have loved for them to be there. We had a few sisters in the audience who seemed to really enjoy the lecture and were very enthusiastic and came up and hugged me after the lecture. We had one or two brothers who were outside who helped with the parking of the cars, but said that they were told that they could not attend the meeting and could not come inside. I, as you well know, made a speech that was heard around the world on November 29, 1993 in Union, New Jersey at Keene College. The students gave me the subject, the secret relationship between blacks and Jews. And it is a secret relationship because it has come to light. The role of the Pope and the Catholic Church, it has come to light what role the white man of England, what role the twin cities of Bristol and Liverpool, what role these slave caves and slave ports played in our genocide and in our black Holocaust that ultimately led to the loss of over 600 million black lives, and a part of those millions lost directly in the Middle Passage, just coming over between Africa and America, and the bones, the bleached bones, I'm sure, and our blood running and flowing in the oceans surrounding these white nations, I'm sure, could be seen for many, many years as the cargo moved back and forth. The Arabs have played a great role in the slave trade, but it has been the so-called Jew. I call him a so-called Jew because he's not the true Jew, the true Hebrew, the true Jew, the true chosen people of God, represented by the original black man and black woman, the diaspora African who can be found in the hills of North America, and many found right here in the so-called UK and throughout Europe and the Caribbean. We are the chosen people of God who fulfill the Bible prophecies and scriptures. But a Johnny-come-lately people who just crawled out of the caves and hills of Europe, and Ashkenazi so-called Jew, imposters who are perpetrating a fraud before the world, have attempted to fit themselves into the scriptures and the prophecy and to steal our birthright. And I spoke very hard against them that day at Keene College because there was a group of them outside of the university auditorium chanting, "Death to Farrakhan, death to Farrakhan. Who do we want? Farrakhan. How do we want him? We want him dead." And as they would, this chant was going on in different sections throughout the country. In fact, we had run a group of Jews, so-called Jews of the Jewish Defense League, the JDL, away from the Los Angeles Convention Center. I organized some men, and we went out and confronted them in the streets and actually spanked them and drove them away from the convention center. We were there, we weren't bothering anyone. We were there with thousands of our own people, close to 15, 20,000 of our own people. We don't go to any of their meetings and disrupt their meetings. And we don't paint swastikas on their synagogues or desecrate the graves of their people, even though we could paint the swastika. It's our symbol. We didn't call it a swastika, but it's an Adinkra symbol from West Africa, and it comes from our culture, and it has now, a spin has been put on it, a twist. It has been perverted, as the white man perverts everything. It has been perverted. So it is our symbol that has been taken from us and misused. But we, knowing the offensive nature, we have not sought to do that in interfering with these people, but for them to come to our meetings and to be disruptive and disrespectful. We went out and actually drove them, ran them down the streets in front of the convention center. But that day at Keene College, I was speaking, and that night at the convention center, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan was speaking, so I was free to go outside as the former Supreme Captain of the Fruit of Islam, and with the respect of the men, organized a serious posse and went out to take care of that business. But at Keene College, I was speaking. So I waged war with the microphone. I waged war from the rostrum, from the podium. And I took no prisoners. In the hip-hop culture, in the rap culture, in America, they call me the truth terrorist, the knowledge gangster, the black history hitman, the lie killer urban guerrilla, the revolutionary roughneck. So, based on these names and titles and this reputation, I'm sure to some degree there must be some truth to it at least. We could not tolerate this. If you call for the death of my spiritual father and my leader and teacher, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, then you have to expect some consequences, some severe, some serious consequences. I'm not especially a violent man, but I'm not especially a non-violent man. I believe in peace when possible, or peace if possible. Peace if possible, but violence when necessary. I believe that you should rise to the occasion. That it's important to understand the iron hand and the velvet glove, to be strong in the way sometimes, but gentle in the manner, to know when to be tender and gentle, but also to know when to actually light a fire under your enemy and adversary when it is necessary. That day, you have probably heard that the statements that went out before the world, that I evaluated our condition in South Africa. This is leading up to the elections in South Africa, and the election of Nelson Mandela. And I said that I don't agree with a multiracial government in South Africa. I don't believe in one man, one vote. I don't believe the white man has any vote in South Africa. After he has murdered millions throughout the African continent and in South Africa and here in the UK, in the Caribbean, in the hills of North America, millions of our men, black men, women, children, and black babies. He deserves no vote. When the so-called Jews ultimately were able to organize among themselves against the crimes and atrocities of the other devil, like themselves, Adolf Hitler, they set up, and the Nazis, they set up what was called the Nuremberg trials. And in the Nuremberg trials, they tried Germans as war criminals for war crimes. They didn't wholesale forgive everybody. This is madness. But for Nelson Mandela to have no trials, there are no war criminals, there are no war crimes. We just blanketly forgive everyone. No intelligent nation, no intelligent people on the face of the planet Earth can understand why we have not had our quote-unquote Nuremberg trials or our trials of the war criminals who have committed and perpetrated these heinous and most terrible crimes against us. In fact, the most terrible that have ever been recorded in the annals of time and history. So I said I didn't agree with a man spending 27 years in prison, and then he comes out and becomes the president, unless there's a script behind the scenes, and somebody had a master white plan, and the strings are being pulled by a hidden white hand. And I went on to say that Nelson Mandela was considered a revolutionary as long as he was locked up. And white people were afraid that South Africa was about to erupt, go up in flames. And so they devised a plan to buy some time. Mandela became the symbolic president, and now he's buck dancing and skinning, grinning and scratching, has turned into a Tom and a sellout in South Africa, just a coconut in South Africa, or what we call in America an Oreo, black on the outside, white on the inside, coconut, brown on the outside, white on the inside. He has abandoned Sister Winnie, who is a true revolutionary and whom we have great love and respect for, who was putting those neckties around the enemies and the stool pigeons and rats and agent provocateurs and snitches' necks and lighting them with gasoline in them and setting them on fire and executing them, actually. I said in South Africa that we should give the white man a period of time to get out of South Africa. Be merciful. Don't just kill them all. Give them a period of time to leave.
By sundown, I think.
I'll get to the timetable in a minute. And the British should go back to Britain, or the English back to England, and the French back to France, and the Oppenheimers, the De Beers, the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, and others, and how Barclay and Lloyds of London and these other international gangsters and rogues have waxed rich from slave labor and raping and robbing Africa of its human and natural and material resources. I said we should send that, the American white men back home, all of them, the Dutch, the Boers, back where they came from. Give them 24 hours to get out of town by sundown. I said if they didn't get out of town, We kill everything white that ain't right that's in sight. We kill the men, we kill the women, we kill the children, we kill the babies. I went on to say, well, why would we kill the women? Kill the women because they're the military manufacturing center. And every 9 months, they lay down on their backs and reinforcements roll out from between their legs. Shut down the military manufacturing center that provides soldiers for the army and oppressors of our people. Say, why kill the babies? I said, kill the white babies in South Africa because one day they're going to grow up to oppress our babies. This is a thing that moves from generation to generation. And they have killed our men, our women, our children, our elders, and our babies. So what is good for them is certainly good for us because it is a position of self-defense. They had no business coming into South Africa. It was an act of unprovoked war on an African nation, on a black nation. I said we kill them all. Kill the faggots. Kill the lesbians. Kill if they're blind, crippled, crazy, all. Don't spare none of them. I went on to say that after we kill them all, go to the goddamn graveyard and dig up the goddamn grave and kill them a goddamn again. Because they didn't die hard enough with all of the crimes that they have perpetrated against our people and still perpetrate against us to this very damn day. I said, if you don't have the energy to dig them up, then just go and shoot in the goddamn grave and kill them a damn again. Kill them again and again and over again until we are our souls are satisfied, until we are healed, until it is therapy for us. I said that there is healing in the killing, that there is medicine in their murder because of what they have done to us. They don't deserve a vote. There's no one in their right mind who would say and agree that if someone comes to your home and bum rushes your home and black boot stomps your door down or breaks into your home, an invader, an intruder, breaks in and rapes everyone in the household, robs the household, then enslaves everybody, colonizes everybody in the household, takes all of your wealth and parlays it into an empire for themselves. Nobody in their right mind, no one in their right mind would now, after you gain power, to get your home back, to get your house back from this invader, this intruder, this criminal, this robber, this burglar, this murderer. Now they've killed your grandmother, your great-grandmother, your grandfather, your uncle, your aunt, your cousin, this one, that one, and all of a sudden you're going to forgive them and say, well, now that I have my home back, we'll be fair. We'll just share the bloody house, and you, mate, or old chap, you get a vote whenever there's a decision to be made, and I'll vote whenever there's a decision to be made, and we'll just be fair about this thing, and we'll let bygones be bygones. Only a fool would let an invader, an intruder, and a criminal come into their home under those conditions, and then turn around and share the house with them the way we're doing in South Africa. This is ridiculous. So for Mandela not to hold any Nuremberg trials, quote unquote, we would call ours whatever we would call ours, and for him to just forgive and forget means to me that we have not matured as a people. And I expressed that the Catholic Church and the Pope had a strong hand in the slave trade. It's a secret relationship because the Jews have hidden their hands, the so-called Jews. They lie to the world. They pretend they are the victims. And that's why it is called a secret relationship. I went further to say that we should raise up the Pope's dress and see what's hidden under that dress. Well, I wasn't dealing with a matter of sexuality. We all know the homosexuality of the Catholic Church. That's no secret. But that's not what I was speaking about. It was a metaphor. I was talking about lifting up the skirts of the garment to show the shame of the Pope, show the shame of the Catholic Church, and how in the name of God, in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, they murdered black men, women, children, and babies, and took divine human beings, the very people of God's choice, and put us in shackles and chains and slave ships, and made us build a white world of oppression against ourselves for them. They went on to point out in the media that I said that the so-called Jews were the bloodsuckers of the black nation. And I went on to point out how they sucked the blood of the black nation. There were many, many points. I said the Jews control the Federal Reserve System in America, the banking system. They control radio, television, newspapers, and many of the publishing houses. They control the college and university and entrance examinations and have a strong hand in the so-called academic system. And now they have a bell curve or some other foolishness where they say black people are inferior to whites. Can you imagine robbing a people of their names, their language, their religion, their culture, their God, their folkways, their mores, their norms, and robbing us of the very power of our own being, and then turn around and give me a test? After you rob me completely of a knowledge of self, then you give me an examination and say, you see there, you guys don't score as high as we do. Or you're going to have a race and you break both of my legs and then you shoot the starter's pistol and you wonder why you don't really wonder, but you want the world to wonder why you finished first when you broke my leg and then called a race. These were points, and I went on to defend my teacher, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan at King College, the President of the United States, the Vice President of the United States, the United States Senate in a special session voted 97-0 against me, and they had, in the 80s, voted against my teacher in the Senate. And for the first time in the history of the world, the full Congress of the United Snakes of America, the House of Representatives in a special session passed House Resolution 343, condemning me. The first time it had condemned a private party within the United States of America. The Anti-Defamation League, which is an international spy organization, the ADL, the B'nai B'rith, the Jewish Defense League, Jewish Defense Organization, many other Jew organizations, many of the Negro, not black, not African, but many of the Negro civil rights organizations spoke out against me. Jesse Jackson, Kwesi Mfume, Ben Chavis, and many others came out during this time. After this speech, it took a turn. Ultimately, my spiritual father suspended me from National Assistant Minister and Representative, but did not suspend me from the organization. I was still, quote-unquote, a member of the Nation of Islam in good standing with all rights and privileges, and I am still a member of the Nation of Islam, quote-unquote, with all rights and privileges, though it seems to get a little cloudy and confused now. There are those who say that the nation is changing direction. I am not sure of that, but some believe that this is the source of whatever trouble that is brewing at this point. I cannot answer those questions. Those are questions that I will have to ask behind closed doors of my spiritual father, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, so that we all can have greater and better clarity.
Thank you. I'm sorry, brother. Can I come to a natural end? One more last question. Okay, one question.
Basically, there's a lot of people who agree with the statements that you make about the nature of our relationship with white people and Jews. But sometimes some people object to your language. I mean, how would you respond to that question?
I believe
some of the statements that King Collid, Loxley, and
I believe with all of my heart that the white man is the devil. I believe I can prove it in Bible, prophecy, scripture, the Torah, Old Testament, New Testament, the Quran. I believe I can go to West Africa to the Ifa Odu text and find it. In Yoruba, I believe I can find it. Among the Dogons, the Twa, I believe I can study and go into the sacred texts of ancient Kemet, or so-called Egypt, and find proof of this. And just from the history of the white man, his bloody history that is written in blood, and in the volumes of books in his own libraries, I believe that the proof is there, conclusive proof, and none of us can deny the undeniable and indisputable and irrefutable proof that is stacked against him, again, since his history is written in blood. I'm one of the Holocaust survivors, one of the Holocaust victims, but I'm a freedom fighter. I'm a revolutionary, and I consider myself a righteous man of God. And when you are a victim of constant and day-to-day, to this very date, genocide and oppression and white supremacy and rabid racism and violence on every level, then it means that you fight in every way that you can by any means necessary. It is my job as a revolutionary. It is my job, it is my duty as a revolutionary and a freedom fighter to wage war with the enemy, to irritate the enemy, to agitate the enemy. What do you mean call names? I want to kill him. Are you worried about the language that I use? If I called him a hook-nosed, bagel-eating, lox-eating, perpetrating a fraud, as you just referred to that Johnny-come-lately, just crawled out of the caves and hills of Europe, wannabe Jew. That's because as we started this interview off, I said he's not the true Jew. We're the chosen people of God, but he's perpetrated this lie before the world. So they're murdering our people and have murdered over 600 million of us. So for me to call them the devil, the beast, the cracker, the hunky, this is mild. That doesn't even compare. It pales into insignificance when we look at the fact that they have told us that we are ignorant and unintelligent and inferior to them by nature, that we will always be their slaves and their servants by nature, that we've made no contribution to the world when everything that they have is based on the civilization that we have given to them. So this kind of violence on their part forces me to again believe in peace if possible, but violence when necessary.
Can you tell us how that came about, your working with Ice Cube and his embracing of the nation with that album?
Certainly. Well, my first experience with the hip-hop culture was, of course, with Chuck D. At that time, Professor Griff, primarily Professor Griff was the entree. Professor Griff, Chuck D., Flavor Flav, Terminator X, and various members of the S1Ws of Public Enemy, who had me on their soundtrack video for Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing, Fight to Power. I was on the soundtrack and on the video. And on Night of the Living Basshead, the voice that you heard after Flavor Flav did She Watched Channel Zero, was the voice that you heard that said, have you forgot that when we were brought here, we were robbed of our names, robbed of our language. We lost our religion, our culture, our God, and many of us, by the way we act, we even lost our mind. And Chuck D come, there he is, dope cat. Then with Brother Ice Cube, we had been trying to meet each other, but as God and the ancestors would have it, he started getting my tapes, as my tapes are beginning to circulate quite a bit. And he got a copy of my tape, The Goddamn White Man. I made this lecture in Los Angeles. I was meeting with a group of Crips and Bloods from street gang organizations at that time who have begun now to form and form ways toward unity, and beginning to take off the blue and the red and wear black. And as I have said to them many times, understand that our common enemy doesn't wear just blue or red, but our common enemy wears white, even when he's butt naked. And I was meeting with this group of Crips, big group of Crips in Compton, and Bloods were there because we had brought them into the territory, those who weren't supposed to be there and the like, and we were ready to speak. So they had given me this big introduction and this big build-up, and I came up with my white shirt on and my bow tie, and I'm thinking that, you know, the Crips and the Bloods are saying, yo, man, you know, who is this, you know? And I really wasn't sure what I was going to say to them, and when I got to the rostrum, when I touched the microphone, you know, it just hit me. I said, my subject today is the goddamn white man. And the Crips and the Bloods, they said, yeah, they started high-fiving, yeah, my man. I said, that's right, my subject is the goddamn white man. So I started breaking down the term that God is the divine, supreme being, the creator, the infinite intelligence, the great power and force, creative and regenerative power and force of the universe. I went through all of this. And damn means to be condemned. It means to be sentenced and I went through all of this and showing how the white man was not just the white man, but he's the God-damned white man. That God had damned him, condemned his world, and his world was ultimately to reach its demise and fall. And so the Crips, they just, I mean, they were just, and the Bloods, they were just in their seat. So I made this lecture again in New York, in Harlem. Goddamn white man. Ice Cube, Brother O'Shea, got a copy of the video of the goddamn white man. Now, Chuck D and Professor Griff and Flav had said on their trips they watched my videos, and that helped their consciousness and helped them with their liberation lyrics. And they said that's not a trip. Well, they didn't listen to my tapes, long hours. And Cube started doing the same thing. So one of the brothers, Brother Ron X and Captain Shahid, made an introduction. And we met and talked. And so I started to meeting with him quite frequently. And he later said, if you've seen the video or heard the tape that I made in Compton called By Any Means Necessary, where Ice Cube introduces me on that occasion. And he said, this is the man who woke me up and opened my eyes and taught me what time it is and taught me what my daddy didn't teach me. We developed that kind of close relationship. So where Public Enemy referenced me or sampled me from my speeches, they would do Minister Malcolm X, Minister Farrakhan excerpts from some of my lectures. But Cube and I would go into the studio together. So when it came time to do death certificate, then I wrote death for death certificate and actually wrote death and rebirth on side 1 and side 2. Of course, it went platinum plus, and after death certificate was lethal injection, which went platinum plus. I did White Cave Bench on platinum, on the platinum plus lethal injection. However, the word, you know, give me a black goddess sister, I can't resist her. No stringy hairs, blonde hair, blue-eyed, pale skin, buttermilk complexion, recessive, depressive, something. Yeah. Straight down. 6 o'clock, no frills, ironing board backside. Something, mutinoid caucus, subject to have the itch. White, cave bitch. He had heard my tape, The White Woman is a Bitch, a two-legged dog, which I did because of the Central Park joggers case where they had locked up these young brothers and charged them with raping a white woman who claimed that she had no recollection nor memory of her assailants. She couldn't identify them in court. They, of course, did a forensics test, and in the DNA testing, they found that the semen or the sperm that was taken from her matched that of her boyfriend, but it matched none of the suspects. But ultimately they were railroaded off to prison, young brothers in their teens. And they lifted her up and made her such a pure white woman, such a good white woman. And they played her up in the media so much until I attacked the image that they were using of her. Because I say that many times the white man will use the white woman, that she's a major weapon in his arsenal. So it's important sometimes to hit that major weapon and knock it out as a freedom fighter in order to give an advantage to our people. So that was when I made the tape that led to ultimately White Cave Bitch. So Ice Cube said that he loved what he was hearing from my spiritual father, the Honorable and leader, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. But there was something about the way I spoke the language that touched him and helped him to see the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan in a brighter light and in a greater light, the way Minister Malcolm X and Minister Farrakhan could always represent the Honorable Elijah Muhammad in a brighter light and cause others to come to him. So he said, I'm going to lead the people to Minister Khallid Muhammad because I know that he will point them to the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. That's how the relationship started. Then I was on the video True to the Game. And on the True to the Game video, this dealt with all the sellouts and handkerchief heads and white woman chasers. And you see Cube, throw down on him with his gat and tie him up and put him in the trunk. And he's dropping him off somewhere. And at the end of True to the Game, you see me as the teacher, they all tied up, tape, they can't do anything but listen, and the teacher is teaching them a knowledge of self. And on the recent video of Ice Cube and Scarface, out of Houston, Texas, that's where I grew up, and Scarface is there in Houston. They just did the recent video where they say, I'm down, I put my gat in your mouth and make you vomit. I'm down with Khallid Abdul Muhammad, something about if he wants a brother and not a other, I'm with him or something. Then Shaquille O'Neal and Def Jeff, Shack Attacker, one of them referenced me, dropping bombs like Khallid Muhammad. And the new group that's rocking and shaking them up, Refugee, Fuji, Sister Lauren references me, and I got Inner Vision like Stevie Wonder, something else. And D like Khallid Muhammad, MCs make me vomit. I come controversial, freaky with no rehearsal. Contraire, mon frère, don't even go there.
She was over just a couple of days ago.
Oh, is that right? Yeah. He said, you can't get with this sweet like liquor, really change it. It's like different liquor. Oh, and X-Clan, which I really wanted them to stick, I loved X-Clan, Professor X, Overseer, Brother J, Funk Alexan, Paradise Architect, all of them, they referenced me on Exodus, where I did, now you're wearing the X, because of the Spike Lee movie, Malcolm X, and so many wearing it, and say, now you're wearing the X. But are you willing to get behind the man today who's the leader of the real X-Clan? And the leader of the real X-Clan is the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. Cam, very close to Cam, very close to Shorty and the Lynch Mob, very close to Brother Paris, and very close to Brother Dougie Fresh, and the Wu-Tang Clan, and Brand Nubian, and many others. But I want to sit with Snoop Dogg, Suge Knight, Dr. Dre. I want to begin to sit with them. Recently, I was at the wedding of Brother Speech, folks with Arrested Development. He just got married a month ago or so. And we've spent a lot of time together. And he came and got a whole library of tapes from Africa by Design tape connection in Atlanta. So, as Source said, they raised the question, can Khalid Muhammad, in words, impact the hip-hop culture with his Black Power message? And, of course, that is my hope. And that is my sincere commitment and prayer that we can touch the hip-hop culture in a way that will force them to rap revolutionary rap, and to start dropping the kind of science and dropping the kind of liberation lyrics that will inspire our people and move them to higher heights.
Do you feel that, because I remember in the Source piece you said you described rappers as prophets of revolution, but do you think that they are utilizing that at the moment? Because the current climate of hip-hop, even though there are groups like Brand Nubian and Speech, the predominance in hip-hop that we see on MTV and whatever is a kind of negative one as opposed to a kind of uplifting one that we saw maybe a few years ago with with PE and KRS-One, around the time of the early 90s to do the right thing.
KRS-One and I met recently too, yes.
Do you think that there is a serious problem that exists, and how do you see, the rappers getting out of it in terms of the images they're portraying?
As Source said, and in the Vibe interview that is to come out, I said that I don't see it as a serious problem, as so many others do. Reverend Calvin Butts of Abyssinia Baptist Church, formerly Reverend and Congressman Adam Clayton Powell's church. I disagree with him greatly. I don't see it as a great problem. I believe, as the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad and the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan have taught, I believe that this is the best generation that we have ever produced. If indeed the rappers are what Chuck D called the CNN or the Black experience, and Soldier, very close relationship. When I was minister in Mosque number 7 in Harlem, Sister Soldier, of course, would come to the Sunday lectures from time to time and be right there. We do Black expos together around the country, and also Tupac Shakur, which they mentioned in the Source piece. And I love his mother, who is one of the great revolutionaries in history, with the Panther 21, Sister Afeni. Tupac is a child of the revolution and a child of the struggle. And I want to, as I mentioned Tupac, and tie all of that in with what you're asking me, I think this is the best generation that we have ever produced, because this is the generation of rage. This is the generation of anger. This is the generation that has decided we're no longer going to go along with what's been going on. That you either stop or drop. This is the generation that says that, and it's exhibited and presented more in the rap culture and the hip-hop culture probably than anywhere else. What is being called this negative trend represents the pain and the suffering and the frustration of 400 years of slavery, suffering, and death. It represents an inborn desire to fight. There has to be a greater level of consciousness added to it. You put the right spin on it and reach them and turn them in a certain direction. You move a great segment of the masses of black people overnight, within 24 hours' time, almost literally, in my judgment. I think it is more important for them now to continue to speak the language of the angry masses of black youth. In China, in the Cultural Revolution of Mao Zedong, it was the youth that Mao affected first. And the Red Guard and others, millions of youth went around the country and the countryside organizing Mao Zedong's Cultural Revolution. And these youth who organized Mao's Cultural Revolution made a great difference. It was Fidel Castro, when he was to topple the puppet government controlled by the white CIA backed Americans and other forces, when he went up into the mountains to topple Batista's government. It was the youth who rallied behind him behind Fidel Castro, the Che Guevaras and others in history, the youth that rallied there. Around Osagyefo Kwame Nkrumah in Ghana, and Patrice Lumumba in the Congo, and Amilcar Cabral in Guinea-Bissau, it was the youth who rose up around him, and around Ahmed Sekou Touré in Guinea, it was the youth. Around Muammar Gaddafi in the great September 1st revolution, and Gamal Abdel Nasser in Egypt, it was the youth. So we have a powerful and awesome medium that has to be tapped, and it has to be reached through these rappers. Once that is done, I believe, as I said, it has the potential of turning things around almost in the twinkling of an eye. But I cannot condemn it. I cannot condemn it because, again, it represents the rage and pain of a generation that is not just a generation of faith, hope, and prayer, acquainted with faith, hope, and prayer, but not just a generation of faith, hope, and prayer, but a generation that represents the children of the struggle and the children of the revolutionary movements of the 60s and the 70s. And I believe and I know that we will begin to see different ones of them make the turn, as Ice Cube is beginning to do it. Some say, well, why won't he just stop completely and just put out nothing but liberation literature and revolutionary rap? Liberation lyrics and revolutionary rap. Well, my advice to him and the advice of my spiritual father, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, to him was, you can't just change overnight. You got to keep the elements that attract the masses to you. And at the same time, you drop a little science in there. You drop a little light in there. You drop a little something in there that's positive and good. So degree by degree, you've got debate, and you've got that which will tap their nature and ultimately get into their conscious and subconscious mind. So my last statement or two on that. I stand with the hip-hop culture and the young rappers that are considered negative, because I understand the pain and the frustration and the suffering and the anger and the rage. I understand that sometimes when the pain is that deep, we also lash out at each other, and there are elements of disrespect that will come out of what we say for each other. But they have the greatest potential, greater than any of our leaders. Millions are buying their albums, paying money for their albums and their cassettes and their CDs and tapes. So when you got millions upon millions connected to them, it is a revolution waiting to happen. We just have to reach them.
What about the, you mentioned briefly about Suge Knight, etc. What are your thoughts or plans even to address the rift that is coming between the houses of rap in the West Coast and the East Coast, are almost going towards murder right now, it seems?
Since I have so much respect among them, they see me as hardcore, they see me as uncompromising, they see me as deaf to the enemy and the oppressor. And they know that I love them. You know, they know that I've taken an assassin, would-be assassin, several would-be assassins' bullets, shot in both legs, and several others almost killed all around me. They know that I don't give the enemy any quarter to surrender. I'm not for surrender. You know, I'm not kill them all, crush them. And that being the case, since they're so hard, and I come from both coasts. You know, I was the Western Regional Minister for the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam out of Los Angeles over the states of the West Coast. Then, as I said to you earlier, in one of the interviews, Malcolm was the first great national spokesman of the nation, and Minister Malcolm was first, and Minister Farrakhan became second and chose me as third in the line behind him and Malcolm. So then I became Minister of Mosque number 7 on the East Coast in Harlem. And with roots in Brooklyn, I work a lot with Attorney Alton Maddox with the United African Movement in Brooklyn. Dr. Malik Zul Shabazz there out of Howard University in D.C. on the East Coast. with the strong ties and work and connection that I've done on the East Coast and West Coast, I'm of both of the worlds. And as we have been effective, I believe, and if I must say so, as humbly as it can be said, whatever little influence we have had with so-called gang members, Crips and Bloods, whatever rivers of blood between them, whatever way we have been able to affect that, even if it's to a small degree, I think we will have some significant say and impact on this rift between East Coast and West Coast. It's really foolish. The real enemy is the cracker behind the scenes. The real enemy is the cracker who exacerbates the rift and exaggerates the rift and promotes the rift. The real enemy will promote any lyrics that deal with killing each other. But if we were talking about busting on crackers, I loved Ice Cube's not only Lethal Injection, but the one, where the crackers stopped the car, the police stopped the car and they're eating donuts, the brothers eating donuts in the back. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. Where we actually killed, we killed some crackers, I mean, I feel we're supposed to be able to kill some crackers in our lyrics and in our movies. If we said something about it, if we get angry about this thing that exacerbates the East Coast, West Coast tension in music and in movies, the devil, the white man, says, well, after all, it's just music. After all, it's just a movie. So certainly we ought to be able to kill some white folks in the movie. After all, it's just a movie. And put it in our lyrics. After all, it's just music. But they know that it goes deeper than that. I'm going to step to Tupac. I saw his mother recently during Kwanzaa observance and Kwanzaa celebration in Atlanta. And I'm going to step to him. He was very pleased. I heard that I supported him so much during the time that he was locked down. And I'm going to step to Suge Knight and step to Snoop. I wanted to try to get out there to make Snoop's trial. Dr. Dre on the West Coast, Mike Conception, and some others. And to the key forces that I live in New York, so brothers that I see in some cases almost every day whenever I'm in New York, step to them also. As we said to the Crips and Bloods, the real enemy does not wear red nor blue, but the real enemy wears white, even when he's naked. So in truth and reality, the real enemy is not East Coast nor West Coast in terms of some silly rap, but the real enemy, again, is the devil or the white man who is manipulating this from behind the scenes.
With the Million Man March, there's been, over the years, there's been like a lot of talk, rap music is and how it can, be used in terms of like social action. But I believe there wasn't like much representation from like, the hip hop nation in like, the Million Man March in terms of like a lot of the speeches and what have you. Do you know why that was, and do you think there should have been more participation from hip hop people in that respect?
Well, I did wonder about that. But there were many things about the Million Man March that I wondered about. Now, don't get me wrong, it was one of the crowning events of my life. To be in that ocean of black men, black manhood, black unity, black solidarity, black love. No arguments, no fights, nobody got stabbed, nobody got shot. You didn't see no blunts floating around. I didn't see nobody getting high, no 40 ounces, no Heineken, no strong, strong bows and stuff, whatever the stuff is, you know what I'm saying? I didn't see that. I thank God and the ancestors for the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan's call of the Million Man March. But I wonder why there were not strong radical voices to speak that day. even if it was from conscious elements or the hip-hop culture. Some people wondered why I did not speak that day, and I have not had an opportunity to ask, so don't ask me, I don't know them.
Were you there?
Oh, absolutely, I was there. I mean, you know, it was an event that was bigger than me.
Okay.
I wasn't near the podium, but I was in truth and reality hurt. You know, I didn't understand the flavor that day. But it was such an awesome, overwhelming event of history until I felt it was bigger than me, bigger than any conscious member of the hip-hop culture or who didn't speak or any other radical or revolutionary. It was mostly preachers and civil rights leaders and voices that were accepted and acceptable to mainstream white America. Again, not one radical voice rang out.
I thought it was a bit of ironic that the event itself was overall not acceptable, that whole kind of mass movement of black men, yet the people who were speaking were kind of acceptable. You know, so like you said, it seemed very strange, the whole, you know, gathering like that.
Yes.
You know.
But I think the good outweighs the bad. The good outweighs the bad, but everything has, in hindsight, those points that we could, you know, give a sincere and careful and sensitive critique to, or critique of. But I really, in truth and reality, cannot give a good answer as to why they were not permitted to speak that day. I have some thoughts and speculation that's not good for print media right now.
That sort of brings me into a sort of question that's sort of more personal to me, is that, you know, as a member, yourself being a member of an organization whereby your opinions have landed you into trouble, how can you advocate people to join organizations, yet at the same time be committed to their convictions and everything they believe in personally?
Well, it's the natural course of events. It's a part of the natural course of events. It's a part of the natural pattern and rhythm of life. I mean, mother is a dictator, a divine dictator. Daddy is a divine dictator, mother and father. God is a divine dictator. But still there is room for choice, disagreement, personal preference. I certainly advise joining an organization. Anything that we do has its positives and negatives. Anything that we do will have its conflicts, will have its successes and setbacks. Again, that's just the dynamic of life. That's the nature of things. We cannot organize because organizing means some inherent remaining a slave, remaining oppressed, remaining groveling at the feet of our enemy and oppressor and begging him to do for us what we could stand up and unite and do for ourselves is much worse, in my judgment. So it is Minister Farrakhan's prerogative to discipline me. I became his minister, his spokesman, his representative, his national assistant. And any organization you join, I'm sure you will find that dynamic working. So, again, our condition and our disunity is much worse than not organized.
You have a young son, also called Farrakhan.
Yeah.
I just wanted to know, you know, you're hearing a lot of rap records and what have you. Do you ever censor what he listens to? Does he listen to a lot of rap, or are you in particular what you allow him to listen to?
Well, he spends a lot of time with me, but generally he's with his mother on the West Coast. His mother and I are divorced. But I let him listen to anything he wants to listen to. I believe that he has to be well-rounded and well-grounded. And I want him to know everything and know how to temper this and temper that and balance this with that. So he listens to everything.
So I mean, there isn't anything he's listened to that you're concerned that he's checking out, or you're kind of, do you have like talks with him like if he's checking out the latest Mobb Deep album, do you sit down and actually talk about, you know, the music with him?
We do. Oh, he'll ask me. He's just deep. He's deep. I have a son named Khalid, Omar, and then I have some spiritual sons, Malik, Amir, Ali's spiritual daughter named Khallid. But I presently don't have a family situation or family setting, so I mean I've developed this core nuclear family and extended family everywhere I go.
Have you got any future plans to do any more work with other rappers at all?
Well, I never really planned any of these. They just kind of happened, you know. I didn't know that Sister Lauren was going to reference me on Fuji's current pieces. I was in prison when Public Enemy came out with Fight the Power, and the earlier piece that we mentioned, they took an excerpt from one of my speeches. But I actually went in the studio with Q.
Okay, you said you were in prison, did you say?
Right.
For when was this?
In the late 80s, I was in prison. I went to federal prison. I was locked up in Atlanta where they held Mr. Garvey, the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey. From there, they moved me to Douglasville, Georgia. From there, they moved me to a prison in Alabama. And from there, they moved me to a prison in Florida. I had a 3-year sentence. I originally was supposed to do 5 years. I've never paid taxes, and I will never pay taxes. You don't tax a slave. And until we're free, and I'm a rebellious slave who's fighting for liberation and freedom and independence, when the crackers from here, excuse me, when they left here to set up America, the 13 colonies, they said it was a system of taxation without representation under King George. Well, black people very definitely are under a situation of tyranny and taxation without representation in America, and you really are that way here too, as quiet as it's kept. So understanding that, that's one of the points of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's program, that we believe that all black people should be exempt from taxation. So I've never paid taxes. There are some Muslims who do. I've never paid taxes to the white man. I've never voted in any election. I've never seen any candidates to vote for. And even in this election, we got Dole and Buchanan in America, and Clinton, and Forbes, and Graham, Satan, Satan, the devil, Lucifer, and Beelzebub. And either one we vote for, we're going to still end up catching hell. So there's no need to vote for them. I didn't vote when Jesse Jackson ran. Because to me, Jesse Jackson is the same as Nelson Mandela. Both of them are sellouts. Both of them are Toms. They sell out the legitimate aspirations of our people for freedom and independence. They believe more in integration and more in being accepted by the enemy and the oppressor. That's very important to them, and that's dangerous to the liberation and salvation of the black nation. So I was in prison. I was buying a large tract of land in an area called the Lithonia Estates right outside of Atlanta, Georgia. And of course, I've never paid taxes, so the broker who was preparing my package put together false tax returns from the previous year and the previous year. The package had to be tight. I had the money, but I couldn't qualify on paper. And so then they tried to give me the 5 years for never paying taxes and all of that. And so I ultimately went to prison. They played it up every day on TV. They didn't even talk too much about the case. They played some of my strongest speeches. Where we talked, one of my speeches, War is Coming in This Country, and where we talked about how we would deal with the FBI and the police inside of America and what we consider a police state, power stations and what we would do with the gas stations or service stations on the corners, and another subject for another time. But they played those excerpts every day to poison the jury pool before the jury selection, and they played them every day. Then they wouldn't give me bail. There's no bond set. Later, they snatched the bond after the verdict and said that this man is a threat. Now get this, like you have the MI5s here. They said this man is a threat to the FBI because on this tape, and they played the tape in open court. This is a threat against FBI agents and police. So now it's silly to say that the FBI had any need for fear, but that he's a threat against the FBI, so we can't let him out and any witnesses that are in this case. So that was in the late 80s. I was arrested in Atlanta, convicted out of the Richard Russell Federal Building, and incarcerated in those institutes, federal and county institutions that I mentioned.
Was there any black people in the jury?
I think one or two elders went through a little fighting, scared to death. They kept me locked up in the hole. They kept me in solitary confinement almost the first year completely. They were afraid that if I was released into the prison population, I would organize and might even just take over the prison. We could have taken the prison. So when they finally let me out of the hole, there were those who fought for me. And then they moved me. That's why they moved me to so many places. And finally, when they sent me to Florida, which is where they sent the Watergate boys, and while I was there, Gucci, I wear Gucci here?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the old man Gucci was there on some tax case. Had some judges and some cracker senators and big drug boys.
Only the same
institution. I was in the heavy joints at first, and then they thought to send me to this
open prison. Was it like an open jail?
It was like an open prison, yes. And then I was able to organize close to 85 or 90% of all of the blacks in the prisons. The hardcore, all of them with me. Those that they couldn't do anything with were with me, and this is what they had feared. And so ultimately they gave me a release and sent me to a halfway house back in Atlanta. And then ultimately parole. I went back out to LA and was paroled to Los Angeles.
Can we talk about now the circumstances around the King's College speech?
King College, November 29th, 1963, Union, New Jersey. Black students invited me on campus. A brother Al Kareem, head of the Black Student Organization on campus, following in the tradition of great student leaders such as Dr. Malik Zulu Shabazz at Howard University, Brother Michael X at Trenton State University in New Jersey, Brother Hassani, Brother Ja, and Brother Kalfani at between Keene and Rutgers University, and great student leaders around the country had begun to organize and still do to bring me on college campuses. I spoke on the subject, the secret relationship between blacks and Jews, because this is the subject that they chose for me. But outside of the auditorium, the Jews, so-called Jews, were calling for the murder of Minister Farrakhan, calling for his death. They were chanting, who do we want? Farrakhan. How do we want him? We want him dead. Who do we want? Farrakhan. How do we want him? We want him dead. Death to Farrakhan. Death to Farrakhan. So this had happened in some other cities. It happened in Los Angeles. We organized a posse in Los Angeles and went out and actually dealt with them in the middle of the streets and kicked their behinds and drove them down the streets. But Minister Farrakhan was speaking that night in Los Angeles at the convention center. But at Keene College in Union, New Jersey, I was speaking, so I didn't have the opportunity to organize and go outside and directly confront them. I went out earlier to check security and try to reason with some of the so-called Jew professors and others who were outside to tell them to come inside and debate me. You know, don't stand outside for some little punk picket signs picketing me. Come in if I'm wrong and contend with me, deal with me inside. So I waged war from the rostrum or from the podium or microphone that night at King College. A speech that was heard ultimately around the world and entered into the congressional record in the United Snakes of America. The President of the United States came out against me. The Vice President came out against me openly. The United States Senate held a special session, voted 97-0 against me. And for the first time in the history of the world, the full Congress of the United Snakes, the House of Representatives passed House Resolution 343 condemning me. First time that it had ever condemned any private person instead of a government leader or something. And the Anti-Defamation League, which is an international spy organization and an international organization that works to disrupt black organizations and legitimate aspirations of others that seek freedom and independence or justice. B'nai B'rith, JD, Jewish Defense Organization, Jewish Defense League, and various Negro, not black, not African, but various Negro civil rights organizations. Reverend Jesse Lewis Jackson, Congressman and now head of the NAACP, Kwesi Mfume, Ben Chavis, Reverend Ben Chavis, and a whole list of Negroes came out against him. They ran full-page ads in major newspapers of America. The Anti-Defamation League ran a full-page ad in the Sunday New York Times, and the Catholic Church, and the Pope, because of statements that I made against the Catholic Church and the role of Catholic Church and the Pope in slavery, in the slave trade. I don't know who didn't come against me, except the hardcore, the radicals, and the revolutionaries supported me. Ultimately, my teacher and my leader and spiritual father, the day after the Senate condemned me during the month of February of '94, held his major press conference that was heard all over the world, suspending me not from the movement, but suspending me from the post of National Assistant Minister and Representative.
So what is your status or position within the nation right now?
I don't know.
You're officially not spokesman.
You gonna flip that, or you've already flipped it? Oh, that's broken. My position with the Nation of Islam now is nebulous, unclear, cloudy, uncertain, somewhat painful. It is one that I cannot, in truth or reality, with any great degree of honesty and clarity, explain. I still love the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. I consider myself a member of the Nation of Islam. But I am certainly not his national assistant anymore by his choice. I'm not national spokesman anymore. I possibly am a minister, but it's hard to understand that if I'm still a minister, why here in the UK and in cities all over America, wherever I speak now, the Nation of Islam is told that they cannot attend my lectures, they cannot participate, they cannot support it, and they cannot provide security even after the assassination attempt. But these are questions, of course, that I have to ask of my spiritual father, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, before I can answer. I don't, in fact, have an answer.
Don't you, I mean, you must feel some real kind of hurt, because although you say you're still a member of the Nation of Islam, essentially, although you know, you say you're still a member of the Nation of Islam, but you've been suspended from these particular posts. Nation of Islam people are not allowed to come to your meetings when you speak. So in a sense, you've been kind of ostracized within a kind of organization in a way. How, I mean, doesn't that kind of, you know, hurt you? I mean, how do you kind of feel about that? Must really, even though you're being very kind of civil. I'm not expecting you to be raging or what have you, but I would feel, you know, really hurt and let down as if,
Would you
you know,
feel
lack
this?
of trust. Huh?
Would you feel this?
Heavily, yeah. But I mean, how? I mean, have you verbally sought a meeting or reconciliation with Minister Farrakhan?
For the past 3 years, I have sought a private meeting with my spiritual father and leader. And I have not gotten that private meeting yet. I don't know the real reason. I know he's a man who has a very busy schedule. I know that he's just returning from a 20-day tour, friendship tour around the world. Met with Brother Muammar al-Gaddafi of Libya, President Saddam Hussein of Iraq, and the leader of the Islamic Revolutionary Government of Iran, and the leaders in Sudan, and he's met with Abacha, head of the military government in Nigeria, and he's met with Nelson Mandela in South Africa, and he's been all over. And of course, he's formed alliances now with Jesse Jackson and Ben Chavis and Fume and Merle Evers and many others. Marion Barry, the mayor of D.C. These are all people who have condemned him at one point and who have been very strong against him. Jesse Jackson went before the world consistently against him and dissed him, even though he supported Jesse in his first bid for the presidency when nobody else even believed in Jesse. Even Coretta King, the wife of Martin Luther King Jr., and all of the Martin Luther King circle and cipher, that whole Martin Luther King following voted for the white candidate and not Jesse, but Minister Farrakhan registered to vote for the first time and registered members of the nation. I don't know how I missed that, but I missed it. Somehow I missed it that day. Registered to vote for Jesse, and Jesse betrayed that support and trust that we placed in him. I have very little or no respect for Jesse Jackson and Mandela and Brother Prophet and Wallace D. Muhammad. Those are three men I don't have much respect for. But, quick point on that point. Of course I'm hurt. I'm hurt. I'm disappointed. I feel dissed. I feel kind of kicked to the curb. I've given my whole life to this, and I will continue to do that. But suppose there's a strategy. Suppose there's a plan behind the scenes. Suppose he's testing my loyalty and trying me the way the Honorable Elijah Muhammad tested Malcolm, the way the Honorable Elijah Muhammad tested Minister Farrakhan. Suppose he's testing me the same way to see if I will turn on him, to see how I will handle international fame and prestige and honor. How will I handle pain and disappointment? Suppose he's doing that. Well, I've studied Malcolm. I've studied Minister Malcolm and Minister Farrakhan. And when you have the answers to the test, you have the key to the examination. You're not supposed to fail the test. You're supposed to pass that test. So I tried to pray to Almighty God that he would keep me in the best frame of mind. I think it shows poor character to go out in the public against your father. Spiritually, I don't just say that to be saying, that's my spiritual father. And I think no matter what your father does to you, that if you love your father, there are things that you just will not do and will not say about your father, about your mother, that you might say or do about somebody else. Always, you give them deference and respect. So whatever I have to say about my deepest feelings, I got some deep ones. Whatever I have to say about my strongest feelings, and I got some strong ones about all of this, I have to say it to him. Behind closed doors, heart to heart, son to father, student to teacher, follower to leader. That is not for the press, for the media, for tape recorders, for microphones, for cameras. I learned that from my spiritual uncle, Minister Malcolm X.
Yeah.
Because he came out, he was hurt, and I understand Malcolm more now than I ever understood in studying his life and history ever before. I understand his pain, I understand his hurt, his frustration. I understand it now more than ever. And so many of the parallels of 30 years ago are revisiting us and reliving themselves today. It was in November of '63 that Malcolm's trial started for him 30 years ago. And King College was November of '93, exactly 30 years later, almost to the week, almost to the day in the same week. Malcolm held the same position, as I said, in the movement. And Malcolm's teacher came out publicly against him in the Muhammad Speaks newspaper and some other forums within Nation of Islam settings and forums. And Malcolm never really recovered from that. And ultimately, this month, February 21st, Sunday, 1965, that day at the Audubon Auditorium in New York City, Malcolm was assassinated, and mine was an assassination attempt, May 29th, '94. So many parallels, but Malcolm, I feel, as great as he was, and the great contribution that he made, his life is a model life, an exemplary life, a life to study the positives as well as the missteps that he might have made. And I learned just by studying Malcolm, another one of the answers to the test, keys to the examination, is that it's not wise and it doesn't show good character to speak out against your spiritual father. Or the way Malcolm started speaking of the domestic life of the most honorable Elijah Muhammad.
Although, you know, you haven't spoken out against him as a father, and I think, you know, everybody in the struggle that won't expect you to do that. You haven't stopped speaking the way you have been. The reason, you know, why he suspended you, you haven't detracted from that line.
Correct.
Now, it has been said and inferred in various articles, you know, from black magazines and whatever, that as Farrakhan moves, as I say, more towards the mainstream, accommodating, meeting with all these leaders that you know, civil rights leaders which you know, denounce, you've kind of
and calling for a meeting with the Jews.
Yeah, you've kind of seized on the ground which he was initially noted for. So, and a lot of people have kind of inferred that while he's moving that way, you're kind of trying to hold the kind of grassroots of the nation who may be kind of disaffected, dissatisfied with the way Minister Farrakhan is moving. That you're, you know, that you're kind of seizing the grassroots, so to speak. Mm-hmm. I mean, would you?
Well, it's not a negative encroachment.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a son sits under a father in the father's house for so long, mm-hmm. as great a father as I have, as powerful a father as I have, the son should learn something. And when he goes out into the world, into the classroom of the world, you know, he should be able to do well, standing on what his father has taught him. I don't know about all that stuff you're saying, but I do know that I am what God has made me, and I can be nothing else for no one. I will never change. I believe that I must live and die and kill for the freedom and independence of black people. I'm not going to compromise that. I'm not going to apologize for that. And I believe that I can continue to be true to myself, my coding, my nature, and not attack my father. And I believe in the short run, and in some cases in the long run, that it will actually help him. I believe that as I organize all of the radicals and the revolutionaries and the uncompromising and the hardcore youth and those from the hip-hop culture, gang members and ex-cons and convicts and straight up hardcore, again, I believe we will force the enemy to the table with our divine diplomat and our divine negotiator who sits in the mercy seat, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. But I have to be me. And so many people seem to be so soft on the enemy. It makes me have to be extremely hard. And that's not subject to change for anyone.
So how do you feel about when the Minister Farrakhan seems to be taking the nation to a more mainstream, a more mainstream direction?
Well, I have questions about it in its appearance. But what if it's a maneuver? What if it's tactical? Sun Tzu in his book, The Art of War, says you make a noise in the east and strike in the west. You avoid strength and strike weakness. That when the enemy is awesome and powerful and he advances and vamps on you, that sometimes you feign weakness and you appear to retreat. But at other times, when the enemy is weak, or when the enemy his guard is down, or the enemy is asleep, when you have the enemy off guard, you advance and take him out. Sun Tzu in The Art of War talks about the element of surprise, the not so traveled devious route, the not so expected element of surprise and devious route. Suppose what my spiritual father is doing is purely tactical. Suppose he is 100% sincere. If he is 100% sincere, if he is 100% being skillful and tactical and tactful, it still does not change my position. My position is that of a flamethrower. My position, if this were a football team, American football, I don't have to be the quarterback or the captain of the team. I just want to be a hard-nosed, pulling guard down in the mud, in the dirt, right down on the ground with the enemy, breaking crackers' necks and breaking crackers' backs and opening up a big hole so that Farrakhan can step through the hole with the rest of the black nation and go on and run for the touchdown. So whatever his strategy is, whatever his tactics are, you would do best to ask him, for he can best explain his position. Since I'm not his spokesman anymore, and I'm not his representative anymore, and we don't have the dialogue, and I don't have the briefing sessions with him that I used to have, then I can't really, in all honesty, intelligently answer those questions except from my own vantage point and perspective.
Not even any public meetings? Don't you have any public meetings with him? Or speak to him?
I've had one public meeting with him,
yeah,
on the same stage with him.
Yeah.
Just a short while before the Million Man March, I was brought in to Chicago. That was the first meeting I'd had with him to discuss these things that were on my heart. But we didn't have a private meeting, and we didn't have the time, and I thought, so we really didn't go into it. The first I'd had in over 2 years. I was with him at Abyssinian Baptist Church, but I was just in the audience. He kept talking back and forth to me in the audience, and he asked me questions from the audience. He was speaking on the Million Man March and atonement.
Yeah.
And he said the first the first letters of atonement were A-T-O-N, which is Aten from ancient Kemet. So he asked me from the audience, Brother Khallid, would you explain to them who is Aten? So I went into Aten, you know, the great god of our ancestors, the ancient land of Kemet, called Egypt by the Greeks, and so on, so on, so on. And then he referred something else to me, and something else to me, and back and forth. But he never called me up on the stage with him. So today, while we're sitting having this interview, our Savior's Day convention is going on. I wanted to be there. This is our national meeting. He's just returning from out of the country. I haven't heard the news. The government was talking about arresting him, fining him, or bringing him before some congressional hearing because they wanted to investigate his trip to Libya, to Iraq, to Iran. And I sent a telegram, which would, I hope, be read, letting them know that I am there with them in love and spirit, and happy Savior's Day, and that, you know, under fire and under attack from the enemy, that I would not hesitate to be at his side. If, you know, I didn't say if he needed me, but of course if he feels that he needs me. And I hope that would be read, but I sent a copy to him and a copy to be read at the National Convention if they will. So that's the best way I could answer that. But everywhere I go, I'm getting questions about what appears to be a move away from the spiritual black nationalism and the separatist policy and setting up a nation of our own under a system of freedom and independence, as has been taught by the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. More and more our people are questioning me about that, because they feel that Minister Farrakhan's speech at the Million Man March toward a more perfect union, which is out of the fabric of the American political system. His new book, A Torchlight for America, they questioned me about this. His violin concerts with all of the Jews and whites, they questioned me about this. His ecumenical meeting and the gathering that was held in the National House, it's in the center of the Final Call newspaper with the integrated ecumenical groups. And stood a white priest up at one of our Savior's Day conventions in Chicago, Father Flager, said that he loved Father Flager, and Father Flager was his friend. I get questions about this quite a bit, because they know that, you know, they know my position on Father Flager and any of the other fathers or mothers, or mothers, and they know my position on that. So my position just is my position. I don't have to state it in a way that I state it against what his position is. I'm just going to be me and be what I am, really, which is what he made me. And if I'm guilty of anything, I'm guilty of believing everything he taught me. And I intend to live that way. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad says on page 104 of Message to the Black Man, paragraph 4, that the white man is the devil, regardless to time or place. Meaning he's the devil yesterday, today, and tomorrow. He cannot change. You study his history in every time period, and if you find anything doing the same thing in every time period that you study it in, and it proves that that must be the nature or the coding of that thing. He may do it with a different language on a different land, but he's the same man, and he has apparently the same plan. So you can't tell me that the white man is the devil today, and he ain't the devil tomorrow. You can't act like he's not the devil today, or you want to call him by some other name. God damn it, if he's the devil and you teach me he's the devil, and I believe that he's the devil, and it becomes a part of me, and a part of the way I fight. I believe it with all of my heart. And that incidentally includes the white woman, too. She's the devil, too. I have to be clear on that, because some brothers will use that door The white man is the devil. The white woman.
It's funny you should you should quote that bit from Message, from the Black Man, because that was the exact page 104 paragraph, I think it's 4, whatever. That was exactly the same paragraph that Syed Muhammad wrote in a letter to Minister Farrakhan just before the Million Man March, when he was criticizing him from the point that he was making of seemingly moving more towards
magazine.
Yeah, from the moving towards the mainstream. That was exactly the same point he was making in the excerpt that he highlighted. I mean, taking that into account, you just stated that yourself. I mean, do you have any relationship with Syed Muhammad? Silas.
The Lost Found Nation.
Yeah.
Well, as I said last night, I have affiliation with all of our leaders, and especially the radicals and the uncompromising and the revolutionaries. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad called for reparations. My spiritual great-grandfather, the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey, called for reparations. So for my brother, Minister Silas Muhammad, the Honorable Silas Muhammad, to have taken reparations before the Hague and is now moving toward the United Nations with it. I have respect for that. I have respect for I've heard the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan said he had much respect for the Honorable Silas Muhammad, taking the teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad and beginning to work as he has worked with him. Yes, sir, I do have contact with the Honorable Silas Muhammad, because if you have heard, I don't know if you have or not, I was the one who worked very hard between the two of them, the Honorable Louis Farrakhan and the Honorable Silas Muhammad, trying to pull them together, trying to bridge the gulf or the gap between them, trying to help them negotiate a unity. I would go back and forth all the time between the two. So I do have contact with him. In some cases I've had recent contact with him. And I have respect for him. If Jesse Jackson can disagree with the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan and still be considered an ally, when what he did was before the world, and he still consistently does it, even during the Million Man March, he talked out of both sides of his mouth. Have disagreement with Minister Farrakhan. I'm only working for unity among our people. But I am also working, as I said last night, to travel the length and breadth, 196,940,000 square miles of the planet Earth, looking for all of the uncompromising, hardcore revolutionaries and freedom fighters, and those who have that in them and don't know it yet, to tap it. And I could not leave Brother Silas Muhammad out. Brother Kwame Ture and Reverend Shaka Musa Bar Shango and the many, many others that I think we should seek unity and alliances with, Dr. Yusuf Ben Yakin and Dr. John Henry Clark, excuse me, and others.
So in the last 2 years then, since you haven't been, you no longer been holding your position as national spokesman, what is the nature of your work now? Are you starting your own organization? Are you working with other organizations? What is really the nature of your day-to-day, week-to-week work?
One thing I'm working on now is an alternative holiday to Thanksgiving. In America, we have Thanksgiving. It's supposed to be the day the Pilgrims landed, and the Mayflower. You know about those boys. They came from over this way somewhere. And eat turkey, dressing, cranberry sauce, and pumpkin pie and stuff. And try to celebrate, really we still celebrate the genocide and the murder of the red man and the red woman called Indian. We have, of course, you know, an alternative holiday to Christmas and New Year, which is Kwanzaa, which runs 7 days from from February 26th to January 1st. Parallels with the Nguzo Sabo, the 7 principles of blackness, which are the moral minimum value system established born from our ancestors and our culture by Dr. Maulana Karanga in the 60s. I'm working on an alternative holiday to Thanksgiving, and as Kwanzaa draws from during the Christmas
false holiday because Jesus was not born during the month of December, and he was not a blonde-haired, blue-eyed, pale-skinned white man, but a black man with nappy hair. As Jesus, the black revolutionary Messiah's birthday has been perverted during December, and Kwanzaa is a non-heroic alternative. It draws from East Africa, from Swahili. I want the alternative Thanksgiving holiday, and Source mentioned it. I think Source. Source mentioned it. Did Source mention it? I think it was Source. Source mentioned it.
I think that's a bit too deep for the Source, actually.
No, I think Source mentioned the holiday. It did mention that I'm working on an alternative holiday for Thanksgiving. It would draw from the East Coast. It would draw from Yoruba tradition.
West Coast.
I'm sorry, West Coast. It was Kwanzaa drawing from East Coast. That's to pull this East Coast, West Coast thing. And the Thanksgiving holiday will draw from the West Coast, from Yoruba. We're working on names and working on Yoruba symbols and how the table will be set, what we can use from Kwanzaa symbology during this holiday and the like. But in Yoruba we say adupwe, and adupwe means thank you, or adupwe oluwa. Adupwe oluwa means we give thanks to the Creator. So we're looking at adupwe oluwa as we collectively are giving thanks to the Creator, and we've got to determine the other things surrounding that. I will remain a member of the Nation of Islam and will continue my what I consider principled stand, not to speak out in private nor in public against my spiritual father, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. One of the things he said at the Million Man March, one of the last things he said was to leave there and go and join an organization. Join the NAACP, join the Urban League. Well, I'm not likely to do that, but as I work as a member of the Nation of Islam, I will also build an uncompromising, broad-based, Pan-African black nationalist liberation organization and movement around the world. And we will draw from principles of Maya, Kemet. We'll draw from Yoruba, Ifa, the Akan. We will draw from the principles of the Nguzo Saba. We will draw from the Quran and Islam. We will draw from the Hebrew, the Muslim, and the black liberation theology, principles of the Bible, from the Ifa Odu text. And we'll draw from the best of all of our cultures and traditions. I think that is a unifying force and will create a unifying atmosphere and spirit and a bonding. Since tying the two together, since it appears that a groundswell of support and grassroots movement is developing around the country and around the world, that is uncompromising and believes in freedom and independence, and some believe in separation and independence. There's a difference between separation and segregation. Segregation means one is superior and one is inferior. We've experienced that. Separation says you got yours and I got mine. And we deal with each other on whatever we want to deal on, and we don't want to deal. We don't deal. And that's the deal. That's what I'm doing at this. That's what I'm doing at this point. He said, go back to your communities and work. So I feel that it's important to do that kind of organizing and building based on the guidance and instruction that the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan gave at the Million Man March. Thank you, brothers. Of course, I'd like for you to mention my host, why I'm here. Brother Nkumaya, who you know, see him in the shadows there. As you and the brother Nkumaya, you see him in the shadows there. And
members of the African Task Force that are responsible for my being here, and just the unselfish and dedicated work of Brother Kamayo and his staff. You might get with him before you go, and need some statements from him, because we wouldn't even be having this interview with the Sophias and the Imanis and the Dorines and the Abinas and the Bagwe Tegas and the Razorkas and others had not done the work to bring me here. So I'll make sure to do that. And I also want to give you the same names I gave the other brothers, and that's those working with me directly, Dr. Malik Zulu Shabazz, should be just graduated from the Howard University Law School, and is taking the bar tomorrow. S-H-A-B-A-Z-Z. That's S-H-A-B-A-Z-Z. Attorney Alton Maddox out of Brooklyn. Attorney Alton Maddox. And we've also got Steve Coakley, Ashra Kwesi, A-S-R-A-K-E-I-S. W, I always have to spell it. I mean, I always have to see it. K-W-E-S.
Kwesi.
Yeah, Ashra Kwesi and Quanell X. Q-U-A-N-E-L-L. These are some of the key brothers that are working with me. You might also put on there James Shabazz.
James?
Shabazz.
Thank you very much.